am pleased to be joined now by Michael Lombardi, vast experience in multiple NFL front offices. You currently write for The Athletic covering the NFL, and then you're also on a show, your own show, The Lombardi Line, out of VSiN, the Vegas Stats and Information Network, talking about sports betting. Am I missing anything?
Let's see, I do my GM Shuffle podcast, which I do once a week, and I write the Daily Coach every morning, which is a motivational email that George Raveling, the former basketball coach, myself, Kamadi Ramsey, and Alec, four of us kind of work on it together. So we all do it. So, yeah.
Appreciate knowing about that. I am going to sign up. I want to ask you about Major League Baseball, though, as it pertains to the NFL. Neither have bubbles. MLB trying to do something with regional in order to minimize the amount of travel, but then we find out numerous Marlins players have tested positive, a couple coaches, and that's after playing a series in Philly over the weekend. Is this inevitable to happen within the NFL when and if the season starts?
Oh, I think it's in two entirely different scenarios, right? So in baseball, they go for 3 or 4 days. They go to a hotel. They play, whether you leave. One thing I learned in scouting is when you leave home, you're not home. Whether you go 100 miles, 200 miles, 1,000 miles, you've left. So baseball can condense their travel. Baltimore plays the Mets, the Phillies play the Pirates, they can condense that. But at some point, you're still on the road for 3 days in a hotel or 4 days in a hotel room. That's where the problem lies. In the NFL, there's none of that. You're going to fly in the night before the game. You're going to go right to the hotel. You're never going to leave the hotel property. You're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to go right to the game. So there is a bubble in the NFL in the sense of travel. There's no bubble in baseball. So it's an entirely different enterprise. Anybody that compares the two and says, well, they're looking at Major League Baseball to see if it's going to work. No, they're not. It's an apple to an orange. Baseball's problems are when they go on the road. Will the team, will the players, will they find it amongst themselves to be mentally tough? Because mental toughness is about doing what's right for the team when it may not be right for you. So that means maybe I don't go to the bar. Maybe I don't go out and try to have a couple cocktails and meet some friends, because that's not good for the team. I think that's the separation. The NFL has different problems because of the amount of people, but they won't have that specific problem that baseball just found.
So then, do you think it is not inevitable? Is it possible for an NFL season without any COVID-19 tests, or are you predicting there will be some?
Well, look, there's going to definitely be. First of all, there's so many of us Americans that are testing positive. Some are false positive tests that come back. The testing is unique. The information that we're getting is not necessarily, I don't know if it's always 100% accurate, but we do know this. We have to move past that people are going to test positive. We know that. We can do everything in our power to protect them from doing it, but we know it's going to happen. It's happened worldwide. Which how we react to how it happens and how they behave in terms of what they do. That's the most important thing. And hopefully that everybody that does contract it recovers. And that's really the most important. The death toll is what I look for every day, not who tests positive, because I think that those numbers are going to keep going on.
When you think about an NFL team and its sheer size, would a bubble ever work? Has it been considered by the NFL?
Well, they are going to do some form of a bubble, and here's what they're going to do. They basically have told the players, you can stay at home or you can stay in the hotel. Okay, so one of the two. If you stay in the hotel, you got to stay in the hotel. If you stay at home. Now, when you stay at home, you have to be respectful, mentally tough again, that you're not going to go out and do things that are going to jeopardize the team. That's a lot of responsibility on yourself. You've got to do that. As much as you may want to go out. Now, I live in New Jersey. There's nowhere you could go out. The bars aren't open here. You can't eat at restaurants. You can eat outside, but you can't eat indoors. So there's less temptation in terms of that. So that's their sense of the bubble. They've not stripped away all the players' rights. And added into the fact too, Amber, is that the NFLPA and the NFL owners are going to fine players that don't adhere to the strict guidelines that's been set forth. That's really important too. Baseball, they don't have that. No one's wearing the social distance ring. No one's wearing the tracker. Everybody's kind of behaving as if it's no big deal, because remember, the union in baseball didn't want any of this.
I'm thinking about a young 20-something-year-old who is going to be playing in the NFL, who is living in a city like maybe Las Vegas where things are open. They can go to a
Yeah.
bar currently if there is food being served. Mental toughness. This can't apply for everybody. They can't. Not all these youngins can be perfectly clean.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, and it's a long journey. It's not just, hey, be good for a week and everything's going to be okay. This is going to be an undertaking. But I think you just have to be smart. I mean, you've been dealing with it. I've been dealing with it. You're smart about it. You wear a mask. You social distance. You've got to be smart, and you can't put yourself in harm's way because yes, you are a young man, but also there's a lot at stake here. There's your financial wherewithal, but you have to put that in perspective. It may not be easy right now, but in the long run, it's going to benefit you. And I think that's ultimately what they have to do.
Are you aware of any sort of contingency plan the NFL has? Let's say if a handful of players test positive during the season?
Well, I think there's definitely a contingency that, they have the schedule was made to go from 16 to 12, 16 to 10. So they can adapt the schedule. They can pretty much fudge and do whatever they need to do based on that. I also think they have flexibility in when they play games. If college football is unable to play, I think you'll see the NFL probably much in our living rooms Thursday through Monday. I think we'll see games on Saturday and we'll see games on Friday night. We'll see games on Saturday night. I think you'll see a lot of different variations because the networks, ABC, ESPN, NBC, CBS, Fox, they need programming as much as anybody. So I do think that. I think the NFL is going to be adaptable, and I think they can do it. And I mean, it's being done down in Australia. Australian rules football is taking the same approach, and it seems to be working. In spite of Melbourne has a rise in numbers, Victoria has really stopped all travel in that province there, and they've been able to work their way through it.
The validity of this season, or a possible asterisk mark to whoever wins the Super Bowl. I mean, let's say one team has their entire offensive line test positive, the quarterback probably as well, and this is a couple weeks. Another team goes on to become undefeated and is now the new Miami Dolphins 72 record.
I don't think there should be an asterisk. Look, I think as a player, you have to do what's best for your team. And we do know that if you wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance, you can stay away from this. We do know that. And so you have to be able to be willing to do that for your team. And it's important. And it's a chain fence. I mean, I'm counting on you to do what you could do. You're counting on me to do what I can do. That's really important. And I think the teams that understand teamwork, I think they'll bond together over this like we've seen in the NBA. We've seen some NBA teams that have bonded being away, being in Disney. They go fishing. They do things together because it's forced them to.
So you're putting the onus on the players more so than just how contagious this virus is.
Well, I know it's that. I know it's contagious. I'm just trying to say that to limit the exposure is on the players. I know that you could behave perfectly and still catch it. I understand that. I think there's people, I think maybe you or I have had it and we didn't even know it. I think there could be those situations too. There's so much we don't know. And I think you can't be, and I'm certainly not an expert on the disease. I have no knowledge about how this, but I do know that mental toughness is going to be the biggest requirement.
Prior to this season and prior to COVID, what was your outlook on which teams would be in contention for the Super Bowl, and how much has that changed now that COVID is a factor?
Well, I think it's going to be hard on the new coaching staffs. I think, for a new coaching staff to walk in and basically not be able to put pads on any players is going to be a challenge until the middle of August. I think the other real big challenge is player evaluation. You're a new coach coming into a team. You don't really know the players. You've not been around them. You haven't been in meetings with them. You don't know their work habits. You don't know how they behave. You don't know really how good they are against different levels of competition that you would normally see in a preseason game. So I think what you'll find is a lot of misevaluations. I think the new staffs are really hampered, especially in the month of September. I think the staffs that understand team building, that understand how to win in November and December with a roster that's built to do that. When you look at the Raiders last year, how poorly they fell off in the second half of the season, older team, how they handled this, what injuries affects your team, and then how that creates a problem. is really important. And that's part of team building. You've got to build a team. Maybe you'll lose a game in September, but you'll win 2 or 3 in December when it really matters.
It's interesting you bring up the coaching staff. I'm thinking of players, though, and the makeup of a roster. Let's say there's a team that has more veterans. These veterans don't really want any preseason games. They're not going to have any. So perhaps that team will be better suited than a team made up of a lot of rookies.
Yeah, well, look, I do think the veterans know how to play, but I do think without a preseason, the month of September is not going to be very pretty football. I think even if the veterans can pretend they know how to play, but they really don't. We see it. We've seen it every year in the NFL. The month of September isn't very good football. The quality of football, the pad level's too high. The tackling's atrocious. Nobody's really playing with a great sense of physicality. It's kind of getting their feet wet in the water a little bit. So, the players, I respect that they don't want to really have any of that because why would they? It's hard work. It's challenging, So they've been able to get away with it through at the bargaining table. It puts the onus on the coaches because the coaches now have to create a football team without real practice.
A preseason would be important if, let's say, you're going to have a quarterback battle. Do you think there was ever going to be a quarterback battle between Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota for the Raiders?
No, I don't think any of those guys, even let's say Mitchell Trubisky at Chicago or, Tyrod Taylor at the Chargers. I think it's hard for those guys to lose jobs in the preseason. Preseason football is very pedestrian. It's easy. It's very vanilla coverages. It's vanilla fronts. The level of comp doesn't always meet up to it. So for a coach to bench a quarterback over a preseason game is kind of hard to do. So I think Carr's going to have to lose his job in September and October. And if Carr doesn't make plays when the play breaks down, when he doesn't make plays within the play, then I think that's when Gruden and the staff will make a change to Mariota and try to get more athleticism at the position.
Do you think that's a possibility given what you've seen out of Carr in the last, couple years under John Gruden?
Look, they've won 11 games in 2 years, right? And I don't think Carr has played better. I think Carr has played his best football with Gruden, and yet they've won 11 games. Now, you could say, well, they don't play very good on defense. But, let's face it, they scored 21 points in the third quarter last year as the entire season. 21 points. There's a problem there. Is it game planning? Is it execution? I mean, you've got to really get your hands on the pie to really understand what's going on. I think this is a make-or-break year for Carr. One thing I do know for certain is that John wants a quarterback that can make plays after the play breaks down. I think that's really what he wants. When nothing's there, there's something there. We see Patrick Mahomes do it all the time. We see other quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, do it. That's really the essence of football today. Either you're Tom Brady, who really are smart and can make the play before the play, or the play breaks down and you make an incredible play.
From the pro Raiders perspective, fans would argue, they addressed some of those offensive needs in the draft. John Gruden never had what he really wanted on offense as far as weapons. Do you buy that? You've been involved in so many drafts.
Well, look, Tyron Williams, the kid that they drafted, they signed as a free agent. They drafted the running back in the first round. They rebuilt the offensive line. There's no excuse for the offense not to be explosive. Now with Henry Ruggs, they get a player down the field. We'll see. I think, the Raiders at times last year flashed, understanding their defensive personnel was not very good. They were slow. They couldn't really cover. And I'm not sure that has changed dramatically. Nick Kwiatkowski certainly will help. They've signed other players that can help. But at some point, to beat the Chiefs, you're going to have to rush with really 4 really good rushers inside. You're not going to cover those receivers. I'm not sure the Raiders have closed that gap.
Make or break year for Carr, you said. What about for Gruden, entering his third season?
Well, he's got 4 more years. That's $60 million. It's, I think he's got it pretty well. He's got the market cornered on patience, right? And, look, he's won 11 games in 2 years, I would have thought there would have been a quicker turnaround in terms of the production of wins than it was. It's got to get his team. And now maybe after year 3, this is his team. He's gotten rid of all the players that he didn't feel fit.
Should the expectations be high then for him this season?
I think they should. You're paying your coach $100 million. You got a quarterback you signed to a long-term contract. You put a lot of money in an offensive line. You had $90 million of cap room this offseason. You used every bit of it. mean, Mark Davis has put his money where his mouth is. I mean, they've done everything in their power. They should. Can they beat the Chiefs? I think it's going to be really hard. I mean, Chiefs scored 35 points in one quarter last year and beat them in Oakland. And then there wasn't even a contest in the second time they played them in Kansas City. So they've got a huge gap to close.
Having worked under Al Davis starting in 1998, what do you think he would think of everything going on, the Raiders' new stadium, John Gruden with the team?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. That's a great question, Amber. Yeah, I don't think he would ever pay the coach $100 million. I think that's pretty fair to say. He liked young coaches who were building their careers, not paying for an established coach. So that's A. B, I don't think he would have drafted a couple of the players they drafted. Colin Farrell with no 40 time. Al Davis lived and breathed by the 40 clock. And to draft a defensive lineman without a 40 time, or to draft a young man this year in the draft in the first round from Clemson who didn't run a really good 40 time. So there's a lot of things that have changed since Al has left the team. I think there would be some part, Henry Ruggs he would love, I'm sure. He would love him to death, but there's parts of that team that he would not like at all.
And bringing it back to the NFL as a whole, who are the contenders this year amid COVID-19?
Well, I think, Pittsburgh's going to come down to Big Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, they played really well last year. They were able to lead the league in turnovers and never play a game from in front. They were always playing from behind. And that's really remarkable to do that, to create turnovers when you're playing from behind. Ben's got to play better on offense. They were not very good last year on offense. They couldn't really run the football. Baltimore, I think Lamar Jackson continues to take that step forward. I think he'll be just as good. Cam Newton's an interesting proposition for the Patriots because he's got some really unique skill set that makes the Patriots much different. He can run the ball on third down. He can make that play when the play breaks down. That's where he specializes in. It'll be interesting to see. Buffalo, I think, is a really talented team. They just got to get Josh Allen to play at a higher level, which he hasn't been able to do. So I think it's going to be a highly competitive. I mean, the Chiefs are clearly the class of the AFC. And the NFC, the Niners will have a hard time. I think Seattle certainly has improved their football team. But, in Dallas, with their team to where they are, they should be a playoff team and go deep into the playoffs.
Having worked for Bill Belichick, is this the type of situation maybe he, thrives in? Adversity, a new quarterback, and all these different COVID-19 conditions?
Well, I think he thrives in wanting to build a team. I think if you know Belichick, as I do, it's all about team building. It's all about how are we going to construct this team this year. That's how you win 6 Super Bowls without getting complacent, because every year is a new year for him. And I wrote about this in Gridiron Genius. I mean, he really begins with as if he's never won a game. And he starts every season as from the foot of the mountain to climb the mountain again. And every team that he plays on the schedule, he treats it like it's Super Bowl 49. Whether, you play, the worst team in football or the best team, they get us the same level of attention. So I do think he'll relish in this opportunity. I think the new quarterback will be a reinvigoration of something that's different. It'll change their offense a little bit. It'll allow some younger players to play. With Tom, Tom was such a veteran within the offense that unless the veterans knew what he was doing, it was hard to keep up with him. It's like, you're a rookie walking into the Patriots training camp. You're given the New York City phone directory. It's this thick. You got to learn it real quick. Tom didn't really have that patience with young players. So I think that'll be new. And I think the fact that everybody's counting him out, everybody thinks Buffalo's the best team, I think that certainly is a motivating factor for a guy who's won 6 Super Bowls.
How much patience is Tom Brady going to have in Tampa Bay?
Well, I think Tom, it'll be interesting because those two, the Tampa offense and Brady are kind of different. Bruce Arians wants to throw the ball down the field. He wants to chuck it outside the numbers. Tom likes to work the ball methodically down the field. I think they have to have a meeting of the minds. I think not having training camp, not having OTAs, not having that, I think they'll start off slowly. Last year they were one of the worst teams in pass defense in the National Football League, even though Shaq Barrett had 15 or more sacks. They have to do a much better job of covering with their defensive backfield. They're the best team in the National Football League against the run last year. I think Todd Bowles did a great job. But how this all works together, especially considering how good the Saints are. I think the Saints improved their football team this offseason. So I think that South is going to be rather interesting. Carolina's rebuilding with Matt Rule, and Atlanta was 6-2 down the stretch last year. When you look at them, And as they play, we'll see how well they can adapt. This is a make or break it year for Dan Quinn in Atlanta.